Staten Island. Oh, good stuff. Good job. Hi, folks. My name is Tommy T. I'm an alcoholic. How all y'all doing? I've been working on that for 24 hours. I just want to tell you, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I'm having a blast here already. Everybody's been so kind, and I always like to start out thanking folks because I know what it takes to put an event like this together. And so to everybody doing service and all the committee members, I know you guys have been working on this for months and months, and then to put it all together, I thank you because it's an invaluable service to AA. I think it's just great that we all get together and shout the good news and talk about God and how messed up we were, and it's all good. And Jen, last night, I don't want to follow you anywhere, kid. I'm telling you right now. It's like following an American Indian or an Alateen, You just don't want to do that stuff. And it's good to be down south. It's a lot of fun. Where's my man Lee? Lee. Hi, Lee. That's it. Raise your hand, Lee. Lee's responsible for getting me down here. So if I should say anything offensive or your AA doesn't quite match up with the way I'm practicing these principles, tell Lee after the meeting. Because if you tell me, you'll hurt my feelings, and I'm real sensitive even 28 years down the road, It's just the way it is with us. And my man Lee behind the tape booth, invaluable services. I can't tell you in my business life how many times to pop in a Bob B CD or something when the day just wasn't going well and just realized, hey, that's what I do to earn money. This is what I am. And a lot of times I got to be retaught that. I hope this won't offend anybody, but I'm going to start off with a prayer, and it's really not for you. Let's just try to get this scatterbrained centered a little bit. And it's a prayer that I got out of a non-conference approved literature book. Well, I'm already offending people, I can tell. We got some big book thumpers down here. And it's written by an overeating rabbi who has a very wonderful way of looking at our principles. And it's called The Recovery of the Sacred Art. And his name was Rami Shapiro. But it goes like this. My God, the soul you have placed in me is pure. I am free to live differently today than yesterday. Because it is pure, I am free to live without the burden of past habits, past fears, past mistakes, and past failures. I am free to look at my past without repeating it, to examine for it lessons to be learned and amends to be made, to draw from it what guidance I can to live differently today. My God, may I use today's gift of freedom to further my capacity to serve you, and by serving your creation, with justice, compassion, and humility. Thanks for indulging that. It's AA, right? I mean, that's what we do. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my host, Robbie. It's not Robert, it's Robbie. Who within the first 30 seconds in the car, I realized, oh, wait, and those folks with that goofy sign in the airport, that was special. 10 smiling folks with Trudge the Road of Happy Destiny waiting for you. In New York, we send an Uber. It's great. It's great. But when Robbie and Macy, got the name right, picked me up, I found out that between the two of them, they have 19 months sober. So I said, this is cool, right? And they're in love. Isn't that special? And the trip went downhill from there. So, we had a lot of fun. My sober date is April 8th, 1995. I'm a proud participating member of the Decker Avenue Step Group. We're a 12 and 12 group that meets on Monday nights at Staten Island, New York. So if you ever visit in the big city and you make a wrong turn, you might end up on Staten Island. Well, come to visit us because I promise you one thing. You'll be greeted with a warm handshake, a real bad cup of coffee. But if you're struggling with alcoholism, you won't leave that room without a sponsor, a free big book, and about 10 phone numbers. We're all about the new person. And that's how I was brought into this thing here. And my sponsor always told me, make sure you get to your home group early and set it up because it's going to be somebody's first meeting. And I remember how hard it was to come to you folks. I'm a guy that'll bang on a project door at 3 o'clock in the morning looking for something, but walk into an AA meeting, it's a little drastic, so. life was always difficult for me. I mean, at my earliest recollection, I went through life with a kind of like a tightness of chest or an anxiety level that I believe to be higher than most people because I'm special. And, but I always remember I had an alcoholic father. My sister turned to drugs very early in her life. She's 5 years older than I was. My mother, God, she could have used Al-Anon, and I know I'm going to cry when Robin talks a little later because she never got that, and she endured like 44 years of hell living in that house with us. And, it was just tough. I always felt not good enough. I never felt my father loved me. My whole life was about trying to make him love me, And then also that I thought my mother loved me too much. So I was very confused as a kid, And coming up, I was gifted in sports. I wasn't a bad-looking kid. People seemed to like me, but I never felt like I deserved it. And I always felt out of place. And I always felt just not right. Something was wrong. Little things that would happen in my life turned into big dramatic events in my head. They weren't that way, but in my head. So I've lived two lives, what actually happened and what I believe to happen. And when I tell you believe to happen, I'll go to court and swear on a Bible. Not that stuff matters to a guy like me, but I would. But all that changed at about 11 years old. And there was two guys in my neighborhood, both named Jimmy. Yes, it was an Italian neighborhood. And they said, "Hey, Tommy, we're going to go get some beers. You in?" I knew what alcohol did to my house. I swore I'd never be like my father. Without hesitation, I said, "I'm in." They said, "You're going to need some money." I said, "No problem. I'll steal some." Because I had all the isms before I started drinking. I was a liar. I was a thief. I would steal money from the pockets in my parents' coats and pants, like just to go out and buy baseball cards for the kids so they would like me. I would tell lies. I'd hit 2 home runs. I'd come home. My father would say, "How you did in baseball?" I hit 3 home runs, Dad. They put it in the paper the next day. Why'd you lie? I don't know. So I stole some money. We forged a note. You know, it was a very trusting world. Staten Island was like a big little town, I guess, kind of like Albany. Is that what it is? No, didn't get that one. I practiced that too, but I guess I screwed that up. All right, but Georgia, it's like Georgia, you know. And so we forged a note. Please let Tom buy 3 quarts of beer and a pack of Marlboro. Love Millie, my mother's name. And we went down there. I'm about 5'2". We go walking into the store. On the way down to the Walmart or whatever it was, there's this junkie Glenn standing on the corner. And now, back then, junkies knew their place. They would go to the parks. They would go to the abandoned buildings. Not this guy. This guy would rob one house and try to sell it to the neighbor next door. He was pretty brazen, this guy. And he comes out of this nod and says, "Hey, where you guys going?" And we said, "Hey, we're going to buy beers." He said, "Drink them warm through a straw. You'll get messed up quicker." Back then, we followed directions. Right? You come to AA 25 years later, and some old timer tells you, "Hey, son, do these 12 steps. Get yourself a sponsor. Get yourself your home group." And you're like, "I got this. Don't worry about it." But that junkie is my mentor. Is my life's coach right there, you know. I will follow him to the gates of hell, that guy. And we did that. And when I asked the girl behind the counter for straws, she said, "Your mother uses straws?" I said, "She's got a problem, thanks." And we ran out, you know, and we got them. I'm going to date myself a little bit. It was 1970. I had a boombox, you know. It was an 8-track player. We can explain that to the younger folks later on. And the big album that year was Neil Young, Harvest, and there was a sad song on there, "The Needle and the Damage Done." And we drank those quarts through straws, and we sang poorly at the top of our lungs all night. And I know when Bill says, "I had arrived," boy, that was it. That booze went down, and it was like Popeye with spinach, you know. I had no problems. It was just great. And but I remember, and with some education here, that I drank differently than my friends that first night. Because they did something that I have never done in my life. About halfway through their quarts, they started to put the caps back on the beer. That's bizarre. That's like alcohol abuse to me. And I said, what are you guys doing? I'm already done with mine. I drink quicker than most. And they said, Tom, today's Friday night. We got to have some for Saturday. And I said, the hell we do, man. I'll steal more money. And I pushed one kid down, and I grabbed his, and I just chug it down, and it's all over me. I get sloppy like I always do. But I made like a tactical error. I went after the smaller kid first. So I was able to take his with not too many problems. But then when I went after the bigger kid, I got another half quart in me. I'm really in bad shape. And he just throws me a beating. And I wake up, it's like 12 midnight, 11, 12 o'clock. That's a problem. I got to be home when the street lights go on, 9 o'clock. I got to be on my front porch. I can't even find the porch. I got a cut lip. I got a cigarette burn. I wasn't smoking cigarettes. I'm covered in vomit. And that pretty much can tell you the next 23 years of my life. Just trying to get as messed up as I possibly could on whatever you would put in front of me. I am big on singleness and purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous because it's so important that not to us, we can handle a few of you drug addicts sneaking in, but, it's important that you identify with that person that's going to take you through these 12 steps enough to do things that you really don't understand and don't believe are going to happen. But it's very important to identify with the alcoholism so that therefore you can have that spiritual experience here and recover from alcoholism. But I did everything under the sun, everything that was out there before 1995. None of the new designer stuff you kids are doing, but we had the good stuff, And I did it all because it didn't matter to me. Any way that you could get me to oblivion as quick as I could possibly get, just so I didn't feel. And I didn't worry about that house anymore, and I didn't worry about my life anymore. It was worth it. And I went to any lengths to get it, without a doubt. It was a crazy time in the 70s and the 80s, and I played bass in a band and ripped through New York City's music life back then, played in a lot of good clubs, cut a few albums, did stuff like that. Back then it was basically how messed up you could get and still maintain standing on stage and play whatever came out. And that was it. It was not, jazz technical musicianship. It was like punk rock. It was nasty stuff, jumping into the mosh pit and all that kind of crazy stuff. And I had a blast doing it. The arrests started to come. The broken relationships started to come. And there's a kind of part of my story that I don't like telling, but, you guys paid my plane fare to come down here, and I think it's fair that I tell you the guy that you have in front of me. I got my 16-year-old girlfriend pregnant when I was 17, and we put that boy up for adoption. His name is Matthew. He's 47, and I've never met him. There were terminated pregnancies where I would give the girl money, and I wasn't man enough to show up to support her on that day. I got married in 1985, thinking that would save me because a lot of my friends were going away to college and getting their lives in order, and I figured, let me do something. I'm a mess here. And we got married, and that only forced me to run out on a 8-month pregnant wife, never to look back for the next 8 years. So that's where alcoholism takes me. If you're my friend, I'm going to steal from you. I'm going to lie from you. If you're silly enough to fall in love with me, I'm going to break your heart, and I'm going to do damage to your family as well. And it's not just to some people, to everyone in my life. I burnt every bridge when I came in here. And I started to get the DWI, started to rack up, and a lot of stupid crimes, nothing really bad, but it started to build a pretty good rap sheet. And well enough that the judges on Staten Island knew me by first name and when I would go in front of them. And 1987, I got DWI with some other charges. And I did alcohol awareness. It's a class that you have to do. I have 4 diplomas from that. I could teach that class now. And I knew in 1987 I was an alcoholic, but that didn't stop me. See, if you could have offered me a 6-step program to control your drinking and avoid the calamity that was my life, I was all in. But this 12-step stuff of abstinence, that's a little drastic for me. And they suggested me going to AA, and they suggested me going to AA, and I said, no, No, I can do this. So I went on like a little bit of a marijuana maintenance program, and I remained alcohol-free for 3 years, until 1990. It was a real exciting life. I would go to school at night after work, and I accumulated some licenses in engineering and things like that. I would stay home and just do my thing and get so messed up I would just be laying on the couch watching like bass fishing with Oreos crumbled all over my chest. Very, very impressive for your late 20s, to be doing this. And in 1990, I landed a real good job. Had a new girlfriend. She had never seen me drink. I had a new life. And so I said, well, let me just take a trip to Jamaica and celebrate this job, and then I'll go. And so I booked a trip to a place called Hedonism, and not a good place for somebody trying to abstain. And they serve free rum punch on the plane, and I got in a fight stealing a guy's hat on the plane because he had a cool Jamaican hat I wanted, and I almost got locked up in the airport before my feet even hit sand, and the beast was out of the cage. And it was not like I had 3 years off. It was like it progressed through the whole thing. And in this clothes optional, crazy, all-inclusive place that I was in, everybody knew my name. I was the guy, the idiot, the asshole, just add alcohol, instant asshole. 8 days, I don't think I slept much. To this day, I don't know, I could have Jamaican kids, I don't know. I don't know what happened that week. But I know when I came home, the thought never crossed my mind, I have to stop again. It was, how am I going to control it? And from 1990 to 1995, I've had the worst part of my drinking because I tried to control my drinking. And if anybody's trying that in this room, please stop. Just stay with us. It's not going to get any better. I'll give you a little glimpse of what that looked like. I was 30 at that point. So drinking in the clubs was well beyond me. It was not fun anymore. It was medicinal at that point, So I'd go up to the local gin mill. It was called the Armory Inn. Sawdust on the floor, shuffleboard table, dartboard, pool table. Smells like beer and urine. I mean, I absolutely love it, right? I'm in my element. 365-year-old men sitting there because it's a real dive. And me in a tank top because I'm working out all the time. I look good, I'm pretty much the king of the Armory Inn. It's just pretty pathetic, And we'd sit up there and I'd get my Jack Daniels and my beer and I'd start popping them down. And, if a lady would walk into the bar, hey, I'm your guy. My next competition's 65 years old, right? I'm 30. I got a little dive apartment down the street, It didn't have to be any, let's not say a young lady. It could have been any lady who walked into that bar. I'm your guy. And a strange thing would happen. I'd be able to grab a six-pack of beer. The bartender would give me a wink because he knew my deal, We'd leave. We'd have a romantic evening. I'd wake up in the morning. She still liked me. That's a miracle in itself. I knew her name. Another miracle. We'd go out to breakfast. I'd pick up the tab. I'd open and close the car door. My grandmother taught me well. She'd give me her number. I'd take it, and I'd just drop it out the window. And then my mind would start spinning. You had no consequences. You had a great night. You can do this. You can do this. Go back up Saturday night. I go back up Saturday night. I have that same seat, same Jack Daniels, same beer. No lady comes in. I wake up, it's Tuesday. Didn't call into work Monday or Tuesday. That's a problem. I don't know where I am. I'm looking through the blinds, trying to find out what's the street corner. Where am I? What borough am I in? Am I still in New York? I don't know. I look over, I got a cross-dressing dude in the bed next to me. How'd that happen? Again. And then I'd reach into my pocket and I say, oh, I have a little bit of money. At least I can get home. And there's 5 ATM slips. I wiped out the bank account. I can't pay the rent. 5 years it went along like that. It was brutal. And I would stay sober or abstinent depending on what the debacle was. One time I had a fight with one of those 65-year-old guys. I felt really bad I beat up a 65-year-old man. That was about a month. I didn't go up to the bar. I felt embarrassed, this and that. Crack up your car? Yeah, everybody cracks up a car in my neighborhood. It's like 2 weeks. You wake up with Alex. That was bad. That was 2-3 months, But I would always go back. I couldn't stop. And that brought me to like April 6th, 1995. And I went out for a couple of drinks with the boys on a city payday, which was Thursday. And I tried to go to work that Friday, 5 o'clock in the morning. I get pulled over for my 4th DWI. And little twist to the story, at some point in a blackout during the night, I went home and I got a loaded handgun. I put it with me. I was not a gun-toting guy. I did a lot of bad things when I was out there, but I'm not a guy that does that. And had one in the chamber, which is automatic jail sentence. I didn't know that. But I'm going to go down and shoot somebody I had a problem with the weekend before, or the 2 weekends before. I got a guy in the car with me that I just met in after hours. He was a swell guy. He's doing life for murder in New York State prison right now. Because after this arrest, we got arrested. I sobered up. And he kept going and ripping and roaring, and he was breaking into his girlfriend's house to get some money during the day because we're such sweet guys, That's the kind of way we treat our girls. And her daughter was cutting out from high school and surprised him, and he stabbed her 27 times. And now, some people might look down at that, but I could do that when I'm out for 3 or 4 days because I'm out of my mind. I don't even know where I am, who I am, what I'm doing. I have no recollection of it. So there, but for the grace of God goes I. And that was a very sobering thought to me back then. And so they put me in an intensive outpatient program. I got on a program called Treatment Against Street Crime. I had to wear a beeper. Those remember as beepers. And if they beat me, I had to give a urine sample within the hour. It was a great way to live. I really like that we have all these long-term rehabs and places and detoxes and everything now for the new folks that come in, and they could chill for 6 months here and go to a three-quarter house or go to a halfway house, a quarter house, whatever it is, get a little federal money, do some culinary arts courses and everything like that. It was not my experience, man. I moved back on my mother's couch. Ma, that's not good at 35. Can I stay here for a while? Yeah, all of a sudden the pocketbook gets locked in the trunk of the car and everything gets hidden, all the jewelry's gone, makes you feel real good about yourself at 35. And I'm in up on Superior Court, federal charges for the gun. And I also had some non-conference approved party favors in the car with me when I got arrested. I had a 21-year-old cop's foot on my face when they found the gun because it got serious. And he said, "Don't move, I'll blow your effing brains out." And a tear streamed down my face. And I said, "You'd be doing me a favor." I couldn't believe I did this to myself again. There's a line in our big book that says, the alcoholic builds up his future, a bright future for him and his family, and then tears it down with some senseless sprees. I've done that 50 times in my life. See, I used to think potential was a compliment. It's not. I had a lot of potential. I just never lived up to that potential. And, and that was just, my story. I cannot drink safely at any time. And my mind will tell me every time I can. But I did not know that before I got to you folks. So I was in the Superior Courts, going to that, going to lawyers, going to treatment against street crime. I had intensive outpatient 5 nights a week. And then my loving ex-wife came out of the woodwork and said, "I want a blood and paternity test." And it was my son, and I owed 8 years of child support, all in the same span of time. That was my first 6 months in recovery. And I'll tell you, we all have different experiences here, but I thank God that I was so busy. I had something to do or I was going away every day, so that just kept me busy. I didn't make any A meetings for 6 months. I was just an outpatient and everything. And you know what that's like, white-knuckling it through that? Just letting your mind race every night thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And trying to figure it out without talking to one of us. It's brutal. I don't wish this on anybody. And then I started to go. A guy in my outpatient program said, why don't you come to AA? I said, well, the last house on the block, I guess I'll try it, you know. And I always say this, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous on Staten Island was strong in 1995. There were some angels that wore flannel shirts that took me to diners every night, even if they had to go to work the next day, and they would sit there listening to my newcomer nonsense for hours. These men were awesome. They were not step gurus. They were not big book thumpers. They tried to live these principles to the best of their willingness and ability, but they were not big book folks. The big book was not on Staten Island in 1995 in any big way. You had to dig to find the 12 steps. The only place we saw them was on the shades. And we said, oh no, that's too drastic, right? There's God mentioned there. I'm not going there, you know. And but these guys saved my life just by telling me that they had been gone through similar things to me, and to see where their life had been 10 or 15 years. See, old-timers there, we had some old-timers. Of course, every community does. But the guys I hung out with, the old-timers had 5, 10 years. That was an old-timer to me. Like, I really thought, like, you got to be drinking in the closet at home. Nobody stays clean for 5 years. You know, that was my mindset. And went along like that for a while. And a guy, John, everybody's telling me, you got to get a sponsor. You got to get a sponsor. Oh, Macy, you got to get a sponsor, by the way. All right. Usually before the boyfriend. But whatever order you get to. What an order. You can't go through with it. I get it. So, you know, I knew I was going to work that in somehow. I'm sorry. But they told me I had to get a sponsor, and a guy that was working in the same field as me offered to sponsor me. He had 7 years sober, and he said, listen, I don't know what I got to offer you, but if you need to call me, call me. And I would call John, and he was a great listener. That was his gift. And John taught me the greatest lesson I've learned in AA to this day. John was untreated here for 7 years, and he had demons like I have demons. And John put a 32 in his mouth and blew his brains out with 7 years of sobriety. You can die in these rooms untreated if you let those things swell up and get inside you and do the damage they can do. But John also got me a place to celebrate my 1 year. Nobody knew who I was in AA. I was sitting next to the secretary. Back then, we didn't have it online. You know, you had to actually go out to meetings and find out who was celebrating. And I'm sitting next to their secretary, and he says, and next week we have Tommy celebrating 1. And he said, who's Tommy? And I said, that's me, Skip. And they put on my cake, Tommy the Who celebrates 1. You know. Might sound corny, but man, it was the greatest day in my life. Because I stood in front of that room and I started to cry for the first time. And I wasn't crying because of gratitude or anything. I just realized this is the first time I've been clean for a year since I was 11. And that made me sad. But people wrote things in cards. My whole outpatient program came to see. And man, I fell in love with you guys that day. And I jumped in. I became the chairman of that group. Didn't know anything about a business meeting or anything, but I'm the chairman. I'm the boss. All right? That's what it was. I'm the boss. Listen up. And it was a great group. And I spent time there with those guys for a long time. And went along, and I ended up getting fired from that new job because the arrest caught up with me. And I had put the arrest down on papers at the urging of AA guys, you know. And I said, I blamed all of you. With 18 months sober, I blamed all of you. How could you tell me to do this? And now look, now I'm at my mother's house without a job, right? How could you do this to me? I'm a great victim. I don't know if we got any victims here, but I'm a professional victim, you know. And I go to this men's meeting. Funny. We sat in a big circle. It was called Saturday Night Alive. And the format was everybody got to share. It started at 8:30. We could go till midnight. That's how bad this was. No recovery in the room at all. Everybody just wah, 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 wah. So guess who was the burning desire that night? It was me, and I took about 45 minutes, and I was just blaming everybody in AA. I'm crying, I lost my career because I followed advice here. And I wish I could go back in time and slap that kid. Because when I remember it, I kind of cringe, you know, that I did that. But 3 guys approached me after that meeting, and I called them the ninjas of sponsorship. It was a retired fireman, keep it simple, Richard, they called him. There was a bald-headed bookie from Brooklyn, covered in tats, used to chew a cigar. His name was Lucky George. And then there was this little businessman guy called Cocaine Vinny, And they came over to me, and they started hitting me with corny stuff like, hey, Tom, God wants you on the golf course tomorrow. And I'm like, I don't have any money. Didn't you hear what I shared? I can't play golf. They said, we didn't ask you for a financial statement. We asked you to play golf. We'll pick you up at 8 o'clock. What I didn't know is Lucky George, that bald-headed bookie, had just had an experience with our 12 steps in a working group, and that boy was on fire. And they sat me in the golf cart with him, and we got up to the first tee at this beautiful country club. They weren't paying, by the way. One of our members worked there, and it was like a Tuesday, and you could play for free. So we, they weren't all that altruistic, all right, And but they're talking different language. If we have any golfers here, we're on the first tee, and I'm nervous, and I got all this stuff going on in my head, and all of a sudden Vinny says, Tom, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And I'm like, that's bizarre talk for the golf course. I don't know what's going on. I don't know enough about AA to know what's going on. Hit my ball, my little slice into the woods, and here comes keep it simple Richard with me, and we're looking for the ball, and he says, Tom, all you need is a little open-mindedness, willingness, and can we find the ball, Rich? I don't know what's going on. But then that man, George, in plain language, George could drop the F-bomb with God in the same sentence. Perfect for me. I look back in my recovery in hindsight, the perfect teachers were put in place for me every time, because if you would have hit me with a down south, Bible-beaten, big book thumper, I would have ran from him like crazy, especially if his name was Bubba. I met a couple. And but George said to me, you never have to feel this way again. I promise you. Nobody ever said that to me in the 18 months that I'd been around. And he said, if you're willing to come to my house a couple days a week, he was retired, I was fired, had plenty of time. He said, I will cook dinner. I said, we'll read from this book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's where the program lies. He says, I'm not going to tell you to do anything. You do what the book tells you to do. And I was fired. I heard free dinner. I said, I'm in. And that led me to about 4 months going to George's house, and it was miraculous, is the only way to explain it. Because right away I felt hope. See, I had been mandated to a lot of things. I had to do a lot of things. This was the first thing I was doing because my ass was on fire. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to kill myself with 18 months here, away from my favorite thing, alcohol. And George made it so cool. We would go in, we'd eat a beautiful dinner, we'd start reading. He would give me a Joe Hawk tape of what we read, and then I would reinforce that. It was a cassette tape, another thing we'll have to explain to the kids, Jen, but, we can line up afterward. And it was just wonderful. We were reading the doctor's opinion, and my mouth must have fell open. And George said, what's the matter? And I said, I can't believe they wrote this book about me all those years ago. Because when another member reads this to you, and he was putting my name in the book. He was making it my book. I had read that book 50 times before. I couldn't sleep my first 18 months here. I had really bad insomnia. The old timers, what do they say to you? Nobody ever died from insomnia. Read the literature, right? So you fall asleep with the big book on your chest every night, And if that doesn't work, use the service manual. It's like a Quaalude. It'll put you out in a second, And but man, I could not get enough of this book, and I could not get enough of George. So I was the guy at 35 years old. I'm in front of my sponsor's house at 7:15 saying, oh, it's too early to go in. Oh, he might be doing something. Oh, okay. Was it close enough to 7:30 now? Okay, it's 7:28. I'm going. I was like a little kid excited to go there. And I found out that I'm not weak-willed. I'm not less than. I suffer from the disease of alcoholism. I have a phenomenon of craving that I could never explain. George explained it to me those first couple of weeks. I have a mental obsession that's always going to tell me to go back, even after Alex is next to me. It's not me. I have a spiritual malady that is never going to let me be happy unless I get some relief. And that relief has to come from either God or booze. Booze don't work for me anymore. So I got to turn to God. So we went to that second step. I'm not a religious person. I've been broken open a little bit over the years with that stuff. I am not in opposition of any religion. I think everybody's right. Whatever your God is, whatever floats your boat, that's the deal. Hold on to that. Like that flimsy reed that we talk about in our book, because that's what it seems like. But it is a powerful, powerful thing. And you can't shake me from my God right now. My first 10 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, I used my grandmother as my higher power because she loved me no matter what. And I knew that. And that's what I hung on to. But we went through that second step, and I went through on a willingness to believe. And George was really cool. Like, I would try to argue the big book. That's what new people do, right? Try to disprove the big book. Really? And he would say, well, you don't think your life's unmanageable, Tom? And I'd say, well, I mean, I'm doing okay. How's Matthew doing? Whew. Okay, let's keep reading. He knew when to be tough and when to be kind. He had a gift, and he was the perfect man for me. Every April 8th, I call that guy to this day. He's down in Florida, and we both cry because I thank him for my life. You know, he only worked with one guy. With me, I've worked with hundreds since. I've never stopped. And when he was on his 35th anniversary, he said, I only worked with one guy. I took this guy, Tom, back in New York through the 12 steps. He says, but God knew what he was doing. He had me get a guy that was going to get busy. So he's taking credit for all the guys I've worked with, you know. So it's all good. It's all good. You know, so I went through the second step on a willingness because I knew my life run on my will was horrible. Got me on my mother's couch. Got me $138,000 in debt. Got me jumping over hedges when a car backfired because I thought it was one of the loan sharks coming after me. That's where I was at. And when we went to step 3, I did not understand step 3. I doubt very many of us, when we're new, understand step 3. You know, because if you're going to put it in layman's terms, it's basically you're going to give your life up to God. You're going to serve others. Your life is no longer your business. And like, who's going to jump in and say, hey, I'm in, right? You're going to run out of the house with our hair on fire at that point. But then he just reached under the table and he said, I got a present for you. And he threw a little black and white notebook. And he says, next we launch out on a course of vigorous action. And I'm like, whoa, Spots, 2 steps in one night? That's a little drastic. He says, it's next. Let's go. He made the 4th step so easy for me. You know, I'm a member of a 12 and 12 group, so every rotation we talk about the 4th step, and we get people to come in and say, oh, I'm in my 4th step for 7 months. I used to, when I was younger, blow you up publicly. Now I will just ask, you got a second? Can I talk to you in the kitchen? You're not in your 4th step for 7 months. You're balking. That's what you're doing. I don't care if you're Charles Manson. You do not have 7 months of writing in a 4th step. You are doing all other things that you should be doing this, because I can tell you, having done about 10 or 11 of them in my time here, it is the most important thing that you will ever do in your life. It is the most powerful step that we have, I feel, because it took me out of victimhood. And before I even shared that, I wrote it in 9 days, start to finish. Fear inventory, sex inventory, everything. And it was eye-opening. It wasn't that. It was all in my head. I knew I did all these things, but now I had a different way of looking at this. And it was powerful to me. I had 31 resentments for that alcoholic father that I didn't think loved me. I had 29 resentments for my mother, who would not take me away from that household and leave the only man she ever loved, the only man she's ever been with. I had such unrealistic expectations that they could never be fulfilled. And you know what I realized with my father? He was a better father than I was. I knew him. It was pretty big stuff. And I think I stopped being a victim even before I shared that. But we went and shared that 5th step, and we went to a place called Mount Manrissa on Staten Island, a wonderful retreat center, and it had a beautiful grotto and a big mountain with steps going up. It was a great place to go on Staten Island. They just knocked it down and built condos. It's a really sad sign of the times. But we walked up to this thing, and before I went, I took 3 pages out of my book, and I put them under my car seat. I said, oh, I'm not sharing that stuff. I shared some of it with you folks this morning. Deadbeat dad stuff, things like this. I stole money from my grandmother when she was dying. I mean, I was not a good person, and I just couldn't bring myself to tell anybody that. So we go up on the mountain, we pray up, and I give George about 2.5, 3 hours of my resentments, my fears, my relationships. You know, I always thought I dated crazy women, and that's why I could never stay in a relationship more than a year. But when you look at it 23 times, and you're the common denominator, maybe I got a little something to do with it, you know. It was eye-opening for me. And I shared it, and George was so goofy and so corny. He said, man, I am having a blast taking you through these 12 steps. He said, is that it? I said, that's it. He says, because, man, when you're going home and taking an hour with God, if anything comes up, please call me. Leave it all on the mountain here today, Tom. Don't hold anything back. You're only as sick as your secrets. I stood there like, he knows. Right? But I'm not recovered. I ain't telling nothing, right? And I go down to my car, and I know there's people in this group here that have had these little experiences. It was a warm day. I opened the windows in the car to let some heat out. I sat in the car, and I went to start my car to leave, and I felt like a burning sensation coming up from underneath my seat. And like it was weird. And I shut the car right off. And I grabbed the 3 pages, and I got back out of my car. And the strange thing was George never came down off that mountain. And I looked up at George, and I said, hey, George, wait up. And he went, come on, kid, let's finish these things, you know. And I went up, and I dumped my 10 worst. And George did the greatest thing, and I do it with men to this day. He had an identifying comment with most of them. And it would be like, yeah, things like that don't work out for guys like us. Guys like us. Like he had done similar things. It just meant the world to me. And then he said something like, oh, wow, I never tried that. But it sounds like fun. He made it like it was nothing. And this is the stuff that just made me feel, apart from low life, just garbage my whole life. And it was wonderful. He gave me a big hug, and he said, 6 and 7 at my house tomorrow, we're cooking pasta. I said, I'm in, brother. And I was psyched, man. I could have levitated down those stairs back to my car. And that night, the miracle of the 5th step was I put my head on the pillow, and I went to sleep. The chatter of 1,000 monkeys was no longer there. I'm telling you, it was 18, 19 months in recovery, or 20 months in recovery. I hadn't slept. I went out like a light. And I've been sleeping well ever since because of you folks. And we did 6 and 7, and I didn't understand 6 and 7, but I got another prayer. I had to have another prayer now. I mean, I knew I was fearful. I knew I was a thief. I knew I was dishonest. I knew those big character defects, but we didn't do a deep dive then. Just get through. Get enough power. Let's go. Let's stay sober. So I start praying that 3rd step prayer and that 7th step prayer. Now I'm attending meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous with you folks, and my life is getting good. It's getting good. And then we do that 8th and 9th step, and I write a list, and I told you I had 96 names on my resentment inventory, so there was quite a few amends to be made. But there was so many that didn't even make my resentment inventory because of the stealing and the lifestyle I led, and loan sharks and bookies and bar owners and all these people and mob guys. And I just got locked up in fear, and I couldn't move. And I balked. And but what do? If you're a guy like me, you stop going to the meeting George goes to. You know, we don't have cell phones. You can't get me on the run, so I'll just stay busy. You know, and I just avoided George. And I'm going to tell you, between 10 and 14 days, the thought of killing myself was back. All that work I had done up to that point just went away because I was balking, and I was a piece of garbage again. I was so afraid to call George, and I called him, And you know what he said? I've been praying you'd call. Come on over. I'm ready. We'll review and you can go out and do these. It was awesome. And I didn't do that willingly. We were standing in front of a meeting, and I'm hanging out with a few of my road dogs, and a guy, Bobby, came by and asked me, hey, Tom, I heard you're going through the 12 steps with George. Would you mind speaking for us this Saturday? And I said, sure, I'm good, AA. I'll speak. Lying. And he says, well, we're speaking on the 9th step. And I said, well, I have a list, but I haven't done any yet. I'll get you on the next rotation. He just patted me on the back, and he said, make a few amends. Let us know how they turn out. And he kept walking. And all my friends said, oh, and we'll be there to watch. Fear of being judged, one of my big ones, So I made that call to George, and George said, I'm putting coffee on. Come on over. Where do you get that? You don't realize how lucky we are here in Alcoholics Anonymous. You call your dentist with an abscessed tooth, and he's going to tell you next Thursday. Right? You call a doctor. I have a doctor's appointment for like 3 months away. I could die between now and then. You call a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing, and you tell him you got a problem. He said, I'm putting on coffee. Come on over. You don't get that anywhere. We are so blessed here. And George took me in. We read that, and it talked about cleaning the wreckage of the past with our family. So that's what I did, and I started with my mom. Moms are great. Moms are great. I poured my heart out to her. And I said, we were trained well back then. I told her about the money I stole, and I had pushed my mother down one time, and I was not a good kid. And I said to her, this is what I'm clear on. These are the harms I'm clear on, Mom. Is there anything else you'd like to share with me? I will sit quietly and listen. And she said, oh, you left out a bunch. And I just started praying my 7-step prayer and my 3rd-step prayer, and my mom did not disappoint. She went on to tell me that she was living her life through me because my mom had a tough life. My father was abusive in many ways. And she said she was so proud of me since I joined AA. And she said, I knew you were taking the money all that time, but I thought if it got you out of this hellhole for even one night, it was worth it. 29 resentments from my mother fell that second, and we became best friends. And because you folks, I got to hold her hand when she died in 2007, and I was with her for all that time and took care of her. She never went to a nursing home. We had in-house care, and I was in that house, and I would put her in her hospital bed every night. I wasn't perfect at it. I raised my voice sometimes, but I was there. And I had great men talking me through that. Changing your mother's diaper is not an easy thing to do. It's not a dignified thing to do. But with men like the guys that I have at Staten Island, it was doable. And I am so grateful for it. I don't know if it makes it even, but it makes it livable. I went to my sister. I went to my father in a bar because that's the only place you're going to get Dad. He gets drunk 3 times a day and with a nap in between. And I poured my heart out to him. And his response to that great spiritual exercise was, don't you have to go make coffee for those assholes? Okay, Dad, I love you. But then I started doing something. He wasn't that strong at that point. I was a big guy. I would pull him close and kiss him. Oh, it drove him crazy. I got to tell you, I loved it. I did it until the day he died. My mom and dad died 35 days apart from each other in 2007. And I held both their hands. And my sister, the nurse, we'll talk about that inventory another day. But she was not there. And I got to be there and see them to the next place. And because you folks gave me that dignity and showed me how to be a son. And I became one here. So, I went to that meeting and I shared, and I had one amends to make to my grandmother, and I had a small note that my sponsor kept things very easy and calm, and I had a small note, and I had never been to the cemetery. I went to the wake, but I could not bring myself to go to the cemetery. I needed a drink, right? I was 16. I needed a drink. So I knew the section she was in. I parked my car, and I'm walking up and down the rows, and I can't find it, and it's getting late, and I got to get to this meeting, and I said, I'll have to share on the 3. Now, this is all about me looking good sharing at this point. I am not in spiritual fit at all. And I walked back on a diagonal to my car, and I'm telling you folks, my car was parked where I'm standing. My grandmother's grave was right here. And I walked into it, and the hair on my neck stood up. And I was like, oh, my God. And I pulled this note out, and I'm literate. I can read pretty well, and I could not get the words out off this page, and it was a very simple note. But I just started blubbering like a 3-year-old girl that you just took her favorite doll away. I was like, oh. People were looking at me in the cemetery like, what's going on over there, you know? And it was just, Grandma, I am so sorry that I stole from you and I lied to you, and that you saw me as the kind of boy that I was when you went on to the next world. You've given me everything. You never stopped loving me, and I didn't do anything to deserve that. I said, I believe you can see me, and I'm praying now. I believe you can hear me, and I'm going to make you proud. And I've gotten many messages from my grandmother since. She sees us. She hears us. And I believe that in my heart. So I go to this meeting and I share, and I do 15 minutes staring into a beeper, because I'm going to give you 15 minutes. That's what you asked for. And the crazy thing what happened was about 15 guys from Alcoholics Anonymous came over to me and said, I don't know what you're doing, Tom, but don't stop. You're a different guy. You are a different man up there. And it was a great day, and I just went on a tear making amends. I went on a tear. And, it's really nice. We'll feel the freedom when we're halfway done. Make them all. Make them all. My sponsor used to share, something happened to Tom when he finished his amends, but his inventory cracked up to a new level, and all of a sudden he became really attractive as a sponsor. I don't see these things happening in me, but those that are close to me saw it way before it happened, before I felt it. And so make them all. There's one or two other amends I just want to talk about, because I had lost that job. I had been out, and the job was everything to me, And I don't see, my recovery is always in hindsight. I can give me 6 months and a good sponsor, and I'll tell you why something happened to me, but I never know why it's happening to poor me when it's happening. So when I got fired, it was the end of the world. But I can tell you what was going on. I was so into the money, into paying back the money, the material stuff, lying and manipulating to get the job back, win the court case, do all those things, that I did nothing with the spirit life. I was showing up at AA, but I was on the outskirts. I was not pulling my chair all the way in and sitting all the way down. So God cleared my calendar. I really believe that's what it was. I had the time to make all those amends. I had the time to write that inventory. I had the time to go to George's house. And it was just miraculous. It was miraculous. So I'm maybe 3/4 through my amends, a good amount in, and George says to me, Tom, don't you have to make amends to the Department of Education? That's where I was working. And I said, yes, George. I was hoping the court case would be over before I did that. And he said, why, would you like to try to manipulate the outcome as you've always done and failed? Or would you like to put it in God's hands and see what he has in store for you? I wanted to slap this guy so many times, with these corny things. But I'm like, okay, George, and I'll walk away. And I put on the one suit I had back then, and I go up and go to meet the big boss of the Division of School Facilities, this guy, Jim. I'm there at 7. I don't know the bosses start at 10. I'm in 3 hours in this guy's office, going through, there's the plate glass window he's going to throw me through. And I'm like, I got all worse. I can spiral down in 15 seconds, right? I can have myself broke, living in a trailer park, and nobody loves me in 15 seconds. It's easy to do. And my mind was racing the whole time. And then here comes Big Jim at 10 o'clock. And I said, Mr. Lonergan, can I talk to you for a second? And he said, Tom Taracco, sure. Come on in. I got your case on my desk. Got 80,000 employees in the Department of Education. I said, well, you got mine. What am I, John Dillinger? I mean, this is, it's going through my head, and it's not going well. And we sit down, and he says, what's going on? I said, well, I'm sober almost 2 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and, I have a sponsor, and I'm doing these 12 steps, and I think I've caused you some harms that I'd like to talk to you about. And he said, that's interesting. He leans back. He was a bigger guy than me. Puts his glasses down on his nose, as those old-timers will do. And he says, what do you got? And I said, Jimmy, when I was in here 6 months ago to explain that arrest, I lied to you about everything but my name. It was my gun. I was driving drunk. They were my drugs in the back of the car. But it gets worse. My sponsor tells you I got to tell you everything. Over the last 17 years working here, I've stolen time. I've stolen tools. I've stolen materials. I've been drunk on the job. I've slept my whole day in the boiler room just trying to stay out of the way of everybody up in the school. I have not been an ideal employee for the Department of Education. And he says to me, that's interesting. He said, did you know I was a deacon? No iPhones. I don't know what a deacon is. I said, no. He says, yeah, I do some service in the church. I said, okay, I got an idea now. And he said, we don't find God because things are good. Mine was alcohol too. So I found the Catholic Church about 6 years ago. I haven't had a drink in 6 years. He said, I know what it took for you to come up here today. And he said, I'm not the decision maker in this. The lawyers have it and everything. I said, I know that, Jim. That's not why I'm here. And he said, but if you do get your job back, you come back to me, and I'll tell you exactly what you can do to make this right. And I said, I'll do that, Jim. I walked out of there on fire, on cloud nine. I mean, it was awesome. It was awesome. And we go through a case that was stalled for almost 18 months. They weren't hearing my case. I get a registered letter. They're going to hear the case. Maybe 2 weeks after I saw Jim. And I go up there, and these attorneys put me on the stand and pounded me for 2 hours. And I don't think they've ever heard testimony of a man going through the 12 steps. Because I was so brutally honest that they were making faces at my answers, you know. Well, Tom, specifically the night you got arrested, blah, 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 blah. I was drinking for 3 days. I don't know. I was in a total blackout. That's why I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous now. I'm just going through that. And they're just looking at me like, no, they were my drugs. Yeah. I tend to do that stuff when I get drunk, along with a lot of other bad stuff. And I just kept pouring it out, whatever they asked me. Unflinched. God was with me. I knew God was with me. And I didn't really care if I got my job back at that point. I was already like earning, on the side and stuff. So, but my sponsor gave me a couple of lines to say, and he told me, you take your 2-year chip. I got my chip. Got that, and I'm rubbing a hole in that bad boy in my pocket while this is going on. And the last question they asked me was, Mr. Tarraco, are you telling us today that you have not ingested any drugs or alcohol since April 8th, 1995? And I said, well, first I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear me today, I said, but there's two things that, I said, that's exactly what I'm telling you, but there's two things you can't do today, and I'm okay with whatever you decide. I said, you're not going to take this away from me. I'm not willing to give you this. And they said, what's that? I said, it's my 2-year chip. With that, the arbiter gives me a wink. I don't know if he was sweet on me or if he was one of us, but I don't care. But then I told him, and you're not going to take my integrity because Alcoholics Anonymous has given that back to me. And they came back with a ruling in 5 minutes, which blew my lawyer away. And all we were asking for was a position in the union job that I lost. Not the promotion I was going for, nothing else. And they came back and they said, Mr. Tarraco, I forgot to tell you, I went with my AA folder. Does everybody know what an AA folder is? You got the sponsors letter, the sponsees letters, the home group members, the alcohol awareness, completion things. I had that. They had that too. So, so they knew I was legit AA anyhow. So, but they came back and they said, Mr. Tarraco, you held up really remarkably well. You've done everything we've asked you to do here. Your answers were brutally honest. He said, they kind of snickered. And he said, we're going to give you that job back. And I was like, okay. He said, but if you're able to stay clean, we're going to give you that promotion for a year, if you stay clean for a year. He said, we were so impressed that you're helping other men recover from alcoholism and, and doing service the way you're doing. We're going to award you $17,000 in back pay. We weren't asking for any of that. So how many folks do you know from making some amends got 17 grand, right? I'm that guy. And I could just tell you from that, I realize now that steps 1 through 9 just get us to human. You're not done when you do 8.5 steps, half of your amends, and you just kick back, right? I don't really have to do a formal 10th step. I'll just call my sponsor when I'm mad. No. Stay in that book. Stay in 10, 11, and 12. I've done more growing in these last 28 years because of those steps. I've gone through the steps 10 more times. Over time, big stuff kind of gets on you. You need to do a little house cleaning. By all means, do it. I'm huge in inventory. I switched sponsors, and I do want to mention this guy before I stop. George was not writing nightly inventory. George did not practice these principles the way some of us might. And he suggested that I get somebody who was. And I'm in the rooms of AA, and there's a guy called Angry Joe. He's a biker. He's got red, bushy hair, crazy food in the beard, the chaps, like a lot of you guys dress down here, and the red scarf the whole bit. And he would take a meeting hostage just being angry at everybody, And he's going through the steps on this side of town. I'm going through the steps with George, and I'm having a transformation. But then I see Joe, and he's got the boyish haircut, neat, not a strand out of place, no beard, horn-rimmed glasses, no chaps, neatly dressed, flannel shirt, and he's studying to be a Montessori kindergarten teacher. And he's sharing about 11-step written inventory. And I'm like, oh, my God, what's going on over there? I beelined over, and I said, hey, will you sponsor me? And he took me on, and that started a relationship of 24 years. And every Tuesday night at 9:30, I'd call Joe, and we'd share inventory. I've been over to Joe's house. We did the service. He was my service sponsor as well, and we did the traditions, and we went through the concepts, and I just loved being around this guy. He was sober 20 years longer than me, but we went through the steps at the same time. So he had 17 years of dry drunk as an experience, and he was just a wealth of knowledge in AA and the history and everything, and it was just such a great journey. And Joe got conjunctive heart failure. And he was waiting for a transplant, and he was getting really sick, and COVID hit. And we did a little thing, 13 men. He had moved to Ohio, so 13 men he sponsored. We got on Zoom every Saturday, and his wife would tell us later on that she had to prop him up, but he would not miss that meeting. And, Joe just saw me through so many things. And one of those were, after all those inventory he had heard and everything, I got attracted to a girl in AA, and after I swore I was not going to, and she had 3 children, and I told Joe about it, and Joe said, you don't lay your hands on that girl until you tell me, you come here and sit face to face with me in Ohio. He wanted me to take the trip and tell him that I could accept those children as my own. He said, promise me. And I said, Joe, come on, relax. He said, promise me. Never raised his voice. I said, okay. That led me and Cheryl, my wife, my best friend, to a 14-month courtship. A lot of bumping and grinding, a lot of flirting, but no hands off, for 14 months, and we became best friends. And we talked for hours and hours. My wife still is a little disappointed. She told me things as a friend that now she's got to deal with her husband, But I wish she was here with us. She'd have a lot of fun with you folks, but she couldn't make this trip. And it just cured the relationship stuff. Sponsors see things we don't see. Our fears are all over them. Our emotions are all over them. How we look is all over them. They see it crystal clear. And Joe was able to guide me through so many things over 24 years. He walked me through the death of my parents. He's walked me through so much. He walked me through my son having a heroin problem and me out of my mind. I could have definitely used Al-Anon myself. But even in death, Joe died coming out of COVID. Even in death, I realized the meeting before he died, we got on Zoom, and we got all our sponsees on. We had 85 men to say thank you to Joe, and Joe could barely talk. And up in the right-hand corner, remember Zoom, right? Up in the left-hand corner, there was Jay Green and Jay Green. One guy was maybe 70, and another guy was 40s. Well, John was one of my sobriety brothers. Joe was taking him through the book. Joe finished reading a vision for you with this kid on Tuesday. Joe died on Saturday. Even in death, he taught me to do service. But this guy, Jack Green, gets on. He said, Joe, I don't know you, but I know all about you. I sponsor your sponsor. And he always tells me how proud he is of this guy, Joe. He said, but I got on today to tell you thank you for saving my son's life. And John was like, just glowing below his dad. His father was sober 45 years. Where do you get stuff like that but here in Alcoholics Anonymous? I was busted up, and my wife did well in real estate that year. She bought me a real nice watch, and I cherish it. Not because it's a nice watch, not because my wife bought me it, but she said, look at the engraving, and it says, WWJD. To my Christian friends, what would Jesus do? To this alcoholic, what would Joe do? See, because it's my hope when I leave here that I will always show up for Alcoholics Anonymous, whatever you guys need me to do. Because you gave me a life that I could never dream of. So I'm at my home group early. I'm talking football with the guys. I'm flirting with the girls. I'm still that guy. They think of me as like a father figure now. It's a little disappointing, but, we'll get past that. But I kid you not. I'll be talking over here. My eye is trained on that door. For that man or woman that comes in that's shaking like a leaf, that doesn't think they belong here, that doesn't want to be here, that needs a friendly handshake, that needs that bad cup of coffee, that needs those phone numbers. And I will give them my number, and I will take their number, and I will text them the next day because I remember how hard it was to make that first phone call. We got to stay active here. We got to go out and get them here. They're not just going to walk in. And nowadays, folks, I'm sure this town is the same as mine. 1995, you relapsed, you lost your wife, you lost your job, maybe you cracked up the car really bad, you came in, you got a limp, maybe you're twitching something. These kids are dying. They go out, they just don't come back. I'm tired of going to wakes on Staten Island. And they're all my son's friends now. It's heartbreaking. So my hope is that I always stay here to be an active, participating member of this fellowship that saved my life, because fellow folks, I love you guys. And I hope that came out of this talk today. Thanks for having me. God bless.